go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for our Money Counts webinar. Today, I'll be giving our financial literacy overview. This is our most popular presentation topic because it provides a solid introduction to money management. So during today's webinar, we'll explore our ladder to financial wellness and talk about how you might work toward the next achievable step on this ladder in your own personal financial wellness journey. Before we dive in, my name is Allie Smith. I am a specialist here at Penn State's Sokolov-Miller Family Financial and Life Skills Center. I head the one-on-one financial coaching program and also host this regular webinar series. I am joined today by our financial literacy ambassador, Aiden Kamowski. I just saw him drop a link in the chat. He will be in the chat throughout today's webinar, posting some helpful links as we talk about different things and answering some questions as we go. So throughout the webinar, feel free to ask questions in the chat or also in the Q&A. I'll look at the Q&A at the end. For those of you who are joining from the SMEAL Ethical Leadership Challenge, I will post a QR code at the end of today's webinar, so you'll be able to get credit for that. So before we dive in, as always, I would love to know who's in our audience today. So I'm going to put up a poll. So I'm just asking, what's your affiliation with Penn State? I am seeing so far undergraduate students and staff and faculty, which is great. Alrighty, so for you undergraduate students, I am so glad to see you here in today's webinar because I always tell people working with them one-on-one and even in group presentations, how you manage small money now will be how you manage big money later. So even if you feel like as a student, you don't have a whole lot of money to manage right now, if you can start to put some small but good financial literacy habits in place, you are setting yourself up for success in the future when you hopefully do have some big money. So thanks for coming today. I'm so glad to have you here. All right, so today's webinar is all about financial wellness and the steps we can take to achieve financial wellness for ourselves. So as we kind of kick this off here, I would love to know, what does financial wellness mean to you? You can just throw it in the chat if you're comfortable. I have it pulled up here, so I'll be able to see what you guys think. What is financial wellness, or what does financial wellness mean to you? Okay, I'm not seeing anything just yet, which is fine. I'll keep an eye on that. But financial wellness is not just determined by your income, your net worth, or your credit score. These factors can definitely play a role in your financial wellness, but there are plenty of folks out there who make large incomes that are struggling financially. Cedar says, not stressing about paying off debts and having relatively stable income. Absolutely. I think that's a big part of financial wellness. Thank you. Here's what, according to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, financial wellness is. So in the present, it is having control over your day-to-day and month-to-month finances, and also being able to have enough freedom to make choices that help you enjoy life. In the future, financial wellness looks like having the capacity to absorb financial shock in the form of having an emergency fund, which we'll talk about in just a second, and also being on track to meet your future financial goals. So maybe things like planning for retirement, buying a home, or starting a family. So now that we kind of know and can see what financial wellness officially is, what do you think having financial wellness in your life could bring you specifically? Like, what could this do for you in your life? I would love to see what you think again in the chat. Live stress-free. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. So some things I think about when I think about, financial wellness and what this can do for not only me, but the people that I work with to help them achieve financial wellness. I think it provides, like Wilson said, less stress in your life. That might be the biggest one. I'll also say the ability to make good decisions and decisions that serve you, and also empowerment and independence. These are great things, right? These are things that I want for every single person. And also, these are things that are important to everyone, right? No matter if you're someone who's planning to make or maybe already makes $40,000 a year or $200,000 a year. Less stress in your life, the ability to make empowered decisions around your finances, and the ability to make decisions that, serve you. Those are all great things. So this is how we can start to get there. At the center, we like to approach financial wellness within a ladder framework. So pretty recently, I helped my husband install a gutter on our garage, and here's what I know to be true about climbing a ladder. The first thing is that a stable base is very important. We don't want to sit our ladder on a hill or on like a rocky surface where it's going to fall over. The other thing that's important about climbing a ladder is that you've got to take it one step at a time. You can't jump up to the top of the ladder, right? So our financial wellness ladder actually works the same. A budget is our stable base and our foundation in financial literacy. From there, we can think about creating an emergency fund to be able to absorb that financial shock that I mentioned earlier. From there, we might consider our debts, and any high interest debts that we are carrying in our life might get priority payoff. We can also think about from there planning for the future, thinking about things like saving for retirement, buying a home, starting a family, making those larger purchases. And last but not least, growing our wealth. Ultimately, at some point in our lives, we all probably want to find ourselves at the fourth or fifth rungs of this ladder, where we've planned for our financial futures and are also building wealth. This is a journey, and it will likely take years to get there. So we'll start with a budget, right? Having a good, solid budget is the most important thing that you can do for your financial wellness. All of these other ladder steps are not quite possible if you don't have a budget, right? Within your budget, ideally, you are going to be spending some money today on things that you need and you want, but also setting some money aside for your future self as well. Having a good plan for your day-to-day and month-to-month spending will allow you to refrain from spending all of your money today so you can save some for tomorrow. The word budget sounds, or it can sound, I guess, kind of intimidating or lame. Maybe if you hear a friend say like, oh, hey, like I can't do that, I'm on a budget. You might think differently of them, right? But a budget shouldn't be perceived as lame. A budget is just a spending plan. It's a plan for how you are going to spend your money, and it's also a tool to help you stick to that plan. So a budget or someone having a budget doesn't necessarily mean they're being cheap, right? They're just sticking to a plan. The most important thing I want to say about budgeting is that it is a physical activity, not a mental activity. Maybe you're someone who currently approaches your finances by thinking about your money. Maybe you think about how much you got on your last paycheck, and then you think about paying your rent, and then you're left with what you have to spend on food or use to go out with this weekend. That's a good start. Thinking about your money, definitely a good start, but it's not quite budgeting. It's important that you create a physical budget of some kind. For anyone who is into journaling, I think journaling for your mental health is very similar to budgeting for your financial health. It's all about getting it out of your head and onto paper. And that can be a big stress reducer and relieve a lot of anxiety around it all. So before we dive into the budgeting process here, I just want to kind of share a personal example of how having a budget works in my life and helps me manage my own day-to-day spending. So I did see we have some faculty and staff on this webinar. So, we get paid monthly here at Penn State. And because of that, having a budget is very important. And so at the end of last month, I was running late for work, surprise, surprise. And I hadn't packed my lunch yet for the day. And I'm like, oh, I'm running late. You know what? I'll just get lunch at the hub. No big deal. But I stopped for a split second and I thought about my budget, which I had just done the weekend prior. It's usually when I sit down and do all my budgeting. And I remembered that my food budget was towards the end for this month because it was at the end of the month. And I'm like, oh, nope, should not get lunch at the hub. Let me just pack a sandwich really quick. And I did that, threw it in my backpack, ran out the door, and went on with my day. And that's just a small, tiny example of how having a budget can give you a current snapshot of your financial picture, which you can use to make decisions. If I, didn't have a budget, I probably would have ended up getting lunch at the hub anyway, spending like $10 to $15, right? And one time that wouldn't be a big deal. But as those choices start to kind of stack up is when we can find ourselves in some financial trouble, right? So that's just a small example of how a budget can kind of help you make spending decisions in the moment without having to think about it too much because you've already got a pretty current snapshot of your finances. And you'll pretty much have that at all times if you commit to doing your budget like once a week. A good budget is honest, accurate, and complete. So if you currently have a mental budget or you don't have one at all, it's really this easy. The first thing you need to do is set a financial goal. Starting with a goal can be a good motivator to actually complete and follow your budget. Maybe your financial goal is to save for a trip that you're going on in a few months. Maybe it is to pay off a credit card balance, or maybe it's just to spend less than you make. After you set your goal, you'll find a tool that you like. We'll talk about some different budgeting tools on the next slide. From there, you'll identify your income and your expenses and subtract your expenses from your income. This is also known as tracking your income and your spending. This is an important part of budgeting. The last step is to adjust your spending as needed, and I'll argue that this is the most important step of budgeting. If you're just tracking your spending and you're not really doing anything with this data that you've gathered, you're not really budgeting. Budgeting is all about looking at what you have and using that to make decisions and change your behavior. Just like how I said, I considered my budget when I thought about getting lunch out and ultimately decided not to. That was a small behavior change in the moment, right? So we need to make sure we're looking at our budget regularly and using this information to actually change our habits and adjust our spending. If you discover through this process and through your budget that you're overspending, so you're spending more money than you have or more money than you make, what are some things that you might be able to do to change that? I would love to see some ideas in the chat. This might be a habit that maybe you implement in your life that you could share with others that might help others. I do have some ideas, so I'll start and I'll see if you guys come up with anything. Watching how many times I eat out, totally agree. That's something I was going to say, actually. Eating out is super expensive. And so limiting the amount of times that you eat out per week or per month is a really good idea, especially if you find yourself overspending. Another thing I'll say is to stop using credit cards. If you find yourself spending more money than you have because you're swiping a credit card, don't use a credit card. Use your debit card. You could also implement some kind of rule in your life to curb impulse spending. So like maybe if you are about to spend more than $50 or X amount, it's not going to be the same for everyone. But if you're about to spend more than X amount on anything you haven't planned for, like an object, an experience, whatever, force yourself to wait at least a day before pulling the trigger and purchasing that thing. That could help. If you have a job, you might ask yourself, is buying this thing that I'm about to buy worth the how many ever hours I had to work to buy it? And the last thing I'll say is maybe do a subscription audit. I think a lot of times we sign up for subscriptions and forget how much they're costing us in total. So an audit will never do any harm. So we talked about if you're overspending, what steps you might take. What if you're underspending? What if you do your budget and you find out a large portion of the money that you brought in that month is kind of unaccounted for? Any ideas on what we could do then? Absolutely. Thank you, Samantha. Put away in an emergency fund or savings. Absolutely. So you can save extra money that you have in something like a high yield savings account or just a traditional savings account, or even maybe something like a Roth IRA, which we'll talk about later. You could allocate more money towards like your financial goal that you would have set at the beginning of the budgeting process. And Aiden says, make sure you track random expenses. I agree, because if there's a lot of money left over in your budget, you might not have a totally complete, accurate, and honest budget, right? Totally. Thanks, Aiden. So I said we'd talk about some tools to help you create and manage your budget. And remember, as we're talking about these tools, that your budget needs to be two things. It needs to be a plan for your money and also a tool to help you achieve that plan. So you're looking for some sort of tool that can help you do both of those things, plan your finances and track so that you can stay aligned with your plan. There are truly a ton of tools, apps, and websites out there for budgeting. Some are paid, but many are free. For beginners to budgeting, I recommend using something like an Excel sheet because you have to be super intentional and go in and track your own spending weekly. Tracking your spending can be a really eye-opening habit if you've never done it before. Some budgeting apps can connect to your accounts and track your spending for you. But if you haven't already built a good budgeting habit that kind of forces you to take some time and actually look at what you're spending, it might be tough to implement a habit like that when you start with an app. Whereas with an Excel sheet, you kind of have to set the time aside and track everything manually, or you're not really budgeting. With an app, you might feel like you're budgeting, but if you're not taking the time to look at it and absorb it and use that to change your behavior, it's not quite budgeting, right? So my recommendation is the budgeting sheet on our website. It is a comprehensive tool that allows you to both create your spending plan and also track your spending to help you achieve your plan. You can find it at financialliteracy.psu.edu. If you click the About tab, then the resources link under there, it'll be the first link under the worksheets heading. And it looks like Aiden dropped a link in our chat for that. If you are looking for an app, some apps that some of us use at the center and have heard good things about include Mint, You Need a Budget, Good Budget, Zeta, and Pocket Guard. I do want to highlight that You Need a Budget is a paid app, but you are able to get 1 year free as a student if you use your Penn State email to sign up. And that link in the chat is actually for the student version, the free student version of You Need a Budget. If you do decide to try a budgeting app, be sure that you are setting time aside to pull it up and look at your spending and actually compare that to your spending plan. Again, if you download a budgeting app and don't ever look at it, it's doing you no good. So just keep that in mind. We can't talk about budgeting without addressing budgeting for college. Every year, be sure you fill out your FAFSA application. That is the free application for federal student aid. Typically, the FAFSA opens each October for the following academic year. However, the FAFSA is currently undergoing some changes. They're simplifying it, which is great. But because of that, it won't be ready until December of this year. Another change with the FAFSA coming down the pike this fall is that every student will need to refill out the whole FAFSA when it gets released in December. Whereas in the past, you just had to update some information as a returning student. This time around, you'll have to refill the whole thing. So when you don't see the FAFSA in October, don't panic, mark your calendars and look for it in December. And again, returning students, do be aware that you'll have to refill out the whole thing. So anywho, to budget and pay for college, you've got to do a few things. Every year, you want to fill out your FAFSA. You also want to estimate your cost of attendance. You can do this by using the Penn State Net Price Calculator. That will give you an idea of about how much cost you're going to have to cover. And then ultimately, you've got to think about how do you meet that cost of attendance. And you can do so through these sources on the screen. Make sure you always start with free money. So grants and scholarships. Definitely take some time to apply for scholarships because that is money that does not need to be repaid. After you've maximized all of the free money you can get to help you pay for college, you might want to use earned or saved money. So maybe you look into getting a work study position on campus, which, by the way, I will mention this again at the end, but our office is hiring financial literacy ambassadors. So the job that Aiden has with me here in this webinar, we are hiring and we do have a work study position available. After you've maximized free money, earned and saved money, then you might want to look into loans. Be sure to utilize your federal student loans before pursuing any private student loans. Moving on to the second rung of our ladder, it is to create an emergency fund. Your emergency fund is ideally at least 3 months of your living expenses stashed away in a savings account or maybe even a high yield savings account. Aiden just put a link in the chat for high yield savings accounts. They're great financial tools. High yield savings accounts right now are paying between 4 and 5% interest. So when we talk about this emergency fund, you ideally want to have 3 months of your expenses stashed away. So not like 3 months of your income, but 3 months of the things that you would have to pay if you no longer had an income. So I think about things like rent or a mortgage, utilities, food, loan payments, all of that good stuff. 3 months of those. This is very important because when emergencies inevitably rise and you have an emergency fund, emergencies are no longer financial emergencies. They're just, whatever other type of emergency, family emergency, emotional emergency, pet emergency, whatever. But having an emergency fund does lessen the emergency itself by at least one level. The financial literacy habit behind this latter step of creating an emergency fund is saving. And when I say saving, I don't mean like going to the store and getting a deal or, saving 50% or whatever. That's not quite saving. That's more like spending less. Saving is actually moving money from your spend account or your checking account into some sort of savings vehicle. So I have a quick poll for you. How much do you think we should save? So most of us say 10 to 20% of your income. And that's great. I would agree with that. So we say you should save at least 10% of your net income. But I think 10 to 20% is ideal. 10% is non-negotiable. 10 to 20% is ideal. So if you think about that, 10% of your net income, that is saving 10 cents out of every dollar that you make. I encourage everyone to make that a habit. I wish in college someone would have sat me down and said, you need to save 10%, because I totally could have. I just didn't. I worked throughout college and could have saved money, but I literally spent every single penny that I made. So this is me telling you, if you've got money coming in from any source, commit to saving non-negotiable at least 10% of what you're getting in. This is a non-negotiable financial self-care habit. That's how we can look at it. So the third rung of our ladder is to consider our debts. At some point, you may need to take out a loan of some kind to pay for school or cover a major expense like a car. Most of us already probably have debt of some kind. As soon as you take out that first student loan, you have got debt. So no matter who you've borrowed from, whether it's banks, credit card companies, the government, or even our friends, these people expect that we repay them the money that they've loaned us. And while our friends might be a little more forgiving if we don't pay them back right away, banks, credit card companies, and the government, not so much. That said, it's important that if you owe money, you do have a strategy to repay that money. This means you know how much you owe, who you owe it to, how much it's costing you in interest, all of your options for repaying that debt, and that your budget accounts for those payments. When we fail to repay our debt on time, according to what we've agreed upon, our financial reputation can take a hit. Our credit score can drop, which will make it difficult to borrow money in the future, find housing, or maybe even get a job. We'll talk about credit in a few slides. First, let's talk about how we might manage debt. So when we have debt, the most important thing we can do is remain informed on our debt situation and create a plan for ourselves to navigate and repay it. We should not hide from our debt, and ignoring it will not make it go away. So step one is to get organized, make a list. So on your list, you want to include all of the debts that you owe. Put in the name of the debt. So if it's a student loan, a credit card, maybe you owe a friend or a family member, name it, put in the interest rate, the amount that you owe, and the minimum monthly payment that's required for all of your debts. The next thing you want to do is learn about your repayment options for each debt that you have. Some repayment terms are pretty cut and dry, but some are more flexible, like federal student loans, for example. Learn about your options. This is also something we can help with here at the center. From there, you want to fit those minimum monthly debt payments into your budget. And then, if you have any extra money in your budget that can be used towards paying debt off, go ahead and prioritize high interest debts first. Something like credit card debt should get first priority because interest rates with credit cards are typically very high. So maybe you use something like a debt avalanche or a debt snowball method to really tackle this debt. I believe Aiden threw a link in the chat. Perfect. So I want to kind of quickly reframe this conversation to be more student loan specific for you current students that are in the audience. So if you are borrowing student loans, stay informed on your loan situation. Every single semester that you take out new loans, you should be logging into your student aid account and looking at them at the very least. You want to take a look at how much you've borrowed, what your interest rates are, and whether your loan is subsidized or unsubsidized. Any subsidized loans that you have aren't going to accrue any interest while you're enrolled in school at least half time. Unsubsidized loans, on the other hand, are going to be accruing interest while you're in school. So it's important for you to know which types of loans you have. You likely might have a combination of both. I would also encourage you to check out your new estimated monthly payment every time you borrow more student loans. You can use studentaid.gov's loan simulator tool to help you with this. How you manage your personal debt is reflected in your credit score. Your credit score is kind of like your financial GPA. It gives a snapshot of how well you've managed your debt over the last 3 to 10 years. So it is kind of a lagging indicator in that way. That said, if you're a student, the decisions you make surrounding your credit can affect you at and even after graduation. Your credit score can range from 300 to 850. Typically, anything in the 700-ish and above is seen as good. The higher, the better. A good credit score can make it easier to rent or buy a home. It will make it cheaper for you to borrow money in the future. And some employers may even check your credit score before offering you a job, especially if you're someone who's going into a financial industry of some kind. So it's important to keep your credit score in mind when you're thinking about your overall financial picture. Some mobile banking apps will give you your credit score for free each month. I know mine does. I always get a notification and I get excited when that comes through. But there's also other tools out there if your bank or credit card doesn't give you that information. Personally, I love Credit Karma. I really like it because it not only shows the factors that go into a credit score, but it also shows you how you specifically are doing in each of those areas. It's a great educational tool in that way. And of course, it does not hurt your credit to check it on something like Credit Karma. A quick tip for keeping your credit score good is to always pay your bills on time and keep your credit card balances low. Your payment history and the amount that you owe are actually the two largest factors that make up your credit score. And the good news is that you have control over both of those things. Whereas something like the amount of time you've had credit established, you don't really have much control over that, but you can control your payment history and the amount that you owe. When they say the amount you owe, they're referring to your utilization rate. and that is the amount of your total credit limit that you have used. It's ideal to keep your credit card balances under 30% of your total credit limit, even if you pay it off in full each month. So you never want to charge more than 30% of your total credit limit again, even if you pay off your credit card in full each month. Credit cards can be a great financial tool for building credit, but they are also a pretty big financial responsibility. If you're someone who doesn't have a credit card and are thinking of getting one, have an honest conversation with yourself to assess whether you think you can handle it. A credit card does give you the ability to spend more money than you have, which can be dangerous. And of course, it might not hurt to talk with me or another one of our financial coaches at the center before committing to a first credit card. Our fourth ladder rung is to plan for the future. Again, here you may be thinking about saving for retirement, for your future self, or making a larger purchase like a home. Maybe you're even thinking about starting a family. Here are some ways you might plan for your financial future. First, saving for major expenses. When it comes to buying your first home, there are a lot of expenses to plan for, not only your down payment, which is the thing I think that we all automatically kind of think about, but also closing costs, which can range from between 3 and 6% of the home's purchase price. If buying a home is a long-term financial goal, like 10 years away, you might invest your home purchase fund to take advantage of potential market growth. But if it's something you're thinking about doing in the more near future, like in the next 5 or so years, you might want to just stash those savings in something like a high yield savings account. When it comes to retirement, the best thing you can do is to start investing early and often. If you estimate that you'll need $1 million to retire, which by the way is what they're estimating for like the younger generation, you'll need $1 million to retire, maybe a little less. Don't let that get you too nervous. But if you do need $1 million to retire, the earlier that you start saving and investing to reach that goal, the less of your own money you'll actually have to put into the accounts because of the magic and power of compound interest. The longer that you let your money grow, the more time that you have to gain a lot of free money through the power of compound interest. Be sure to always take advantage of any employer match you're offered in something like your 401k. For Penn State staff members out there in today's audience, we have a 403b through TIAA, which is very similar to a 401k. Penn State puts in 9.29% of your monthly income, and if you put in 5% of your monthly income. So this is really a great deal, right? This is free money. It is a good rule of thumb to always contribute at least what you need to receive your full employer match. If you'd like to invest more for retirement or don't have access to an employer-sponsored account like a 401k or a 403b, an IRA or an individual retirement account is a great way to do that. There is the traditional and the Roth IRA. They work in kind of opposite ways. So with the Roth IRA, you put money into the account after paying tax on it. And at retirement, or the requirement for IRAs in general, is you take it out after age 59 and a half. So at retirement, after age 59 and a half, with the Roth IRA, you can take your contributions and all the money that your contributions earned completely tax and penalty free. So you got all of that tax-free growth. With the traditional IRA, you put money in pre-tax and you pay tax on it when you withdraw. One caveat with IRAs is that you must have earned income in the year that you contribute because of how the taxes work. And because they provide such great tax benefits, there are annual contribution limits. The limit for 2023 is $6,500. So you can't put any more than $6,500 into IRAs this year. Aiden just put a link in the chat for more information on individual retirement accounts or IRAs, and that link can kind of help you decide if a Roth or a traditional IRA might be right for you if it's something you're thinking about. In planning for your future, we not only need to save and invest for our future selves, but we also need to protect our financial futures through insurance and also protecting our identities. Students, renter's insurance is an important one for you. It's pretty cheap, like $10 or so a month. And renter's insurance can help you replace your personal belongings in the event of a catastrophe in your apartment or your dorm room. We also need to think about protecting our identities, and we can do that through regularly checking our accounts. Monitoring your credit score and reviewing your credit report is a great way to make sure you haven't already been a victim of identity theft. If you check out Credit Karma, you'll see a tab on there with all of your accounts. So basically all of the debt accounts that you have out there in your name. You'll see student loans, any credit cards you have, car loans, mortgages, that kind of thing. And you want to make sure all of those accounts out there in your name are accounts that you have opened yourself and that you're fully aware of. You can also pull a free credit report at annualcreditreport.com. We encourage you to comb through it and make sure that you are aware of every item on there. Lastly, you can be proactive and prevent identity theft by keeping things like confidential documents, passwords, and your social security number safe and secure. If you're someone who has been using the same password for everything, including your bank account since high school, take a minute to update that. So now we have reached the fifth and final rung of our financial wellness ladder, which is growing our wealth. Growing our wealth involves investing of some kind. Saving alone is not enough to grow wealth because of the big bad I word, inflation, right? Saving is not enough. So let's quickly watch a short video on the basics of investing.
Meet Bob. Bob just graduated from college and got his first job at Corporate Co. After a month of hard work, Bob has just received his first paycheck. He's very excited. Bob plans to spend 50% of it on rent and utilities, and another 30% of it on food and fun activities, like going to the movies. As for the last 20%, Bob wants to do something with it, maybe even invest it, but isn't sure where to start. So, Bob decides to deposit it into a bank account. Bob thinks this is a safe plan. After all, the bank will actually pay him a small amount of money each year, called interest, just for keeping his money safe at the bank. This sounds great. There's just one problem. Bob may actually be losing money. Bob is flabbergasted. How can that be? Well, it comes down to something called inflation. Inflation is simply the idea that prices for goods and services rise over time. Why inflation occurs is beyond the scope of this video, but your grandparents are cranky for a reason. In the 1950s, you could actually buy a loaf of bread for 12 cents and a new house for 10 grand. Inflation in the US is targeted to around 2% a year. This is bad for Bob. That's because even though the bank may pay Bob 1% for his deposit, prices have actually increased by 2%. So what should Bob do? Well, in order to actually make money, Bob needs to invest in something that will beat inflation. Generally speaking, only three things do: bonds, commercial real estate, and stocks. Let's start with bonds. Bonds are loans made to corporations or governments. In return for your money, called principal, you'll receive a fixed amount of interest per year plus your money back once the bond expires. Because of this guarantee, bonds are the safest of the three investments, though this safety comes with a cost. They have the lowest potential investment return in the long run. Next, we have commercial real estate. This is property purchased to make money, generally by renting it out. While this is quite difficult for the average investor to do on his own, Bob could instead easily invest in a REIT, which is a professionally managed real estate portfolio. Finally, we have stocks. Stocks are simple. They represent a piece of ownership in a company, like Apple or Google. People buy and sell little pieces of these companies, called shares, in places called stock exchanges. When Bob buys a share of, say, Apple, he becomes a partial owner. When Apple does well, the share price goes up, and Bob makes money. When Apple does poorly, the share price goes down, and Bob loses money. These fluctuations can make stocks risky. However, fortunately for Bob, stocks in the United States return on average about 9% a year, including both share price appreciation and dividends, which are cash payments made to each shareholder when the company does well. Thus, if Bob invests the remaining 20% of his paycheck, say $100, he can beat inflation by almost 7% a year. But that's not all. Here comes the real magic. The next year, Bob will not only earn another 9% on his initial $100 investment, called principal, but an additional 9% on the $9 in profit from the previous year. Earning money on both your principal and profit is called compounding, and its magic is undeniable. Start investing early enough, and your portfolio will be like a snowball rolling down a hill, outstripping even those who put in much more but start later. Hopefully you and Bob now understand why it's important to invest your money. Be sure to watch our next video, which teaches you how to actually invest.
Okay, so hopefully that video was helpful in explaining not only why it's important to begin investing early and often, but also some of the different things that are available for you to actually invest in. Of course, investing is kind of a complicated thing, or it can be complicated, and we are here to help you at the center for questions that you have about investing. Now that we've explored each of our ladder steps, I'd love to kind of take stock of where you feel that you're at on the financial ladder. So I'm going to put a poll up, and rest assured, these are anonymous. Your name won't be attached to your answer. And for this one, you are able to click more than one option. If you feel you're kind of navigating two different ladder rungs right now, you can totally click both of those. But I would love to see where you're at on your own financial ladder. As we are thinking about where we're at, I would also kind of consider you to think about what steps you might take to get to the next rung of your own financial wellness journey. And like I said earlier, the center is really here to support you in achieving your financial goals. So we've got a good split. I'll share this out so we can get a feel of where others might be at in their financial journey. We're working on budgets, we are conquering our debts, we're planning for the future, and we're growing wealth. That's absolutely fantastic. So, like I said, we are here to help you as you work towards your financial goals. We have a lot of different services and resources to offer, all for free. All of our services are available to Penn State students, and some of our services are available to staff and faculty and the larger Penn State community. Our goal is to help you understand and take control of your finances. Our one-on-one financial coaching appointments, current students can schedule those through Starfish. Our group presentations and webinars can be scheduled for classes and also student organizations and groups. We have self-study modules on a variety of different financial literacy topics in Canvas. Those are open to the public and do not require any type of login to gain access. Our mentoring program provides, excuse me, a space for current students to connect with Penn State alum or someone in the Penn State community to receive guidance on financial and life skills. And lastly, I would just want to take a minute here to plug our newest offering, which is our workshops program. We are now enrolling into our financial foundations workshops for this fall. This is an opportunity to get hands-on with your finances. So instead of learning about budgeting, you'll build and work on your own budget. Instead of learning about credit score, you'll check your own credit score and pull your credit report. The Financial Foundations workshop, when you enroll into a Financial Foundations workshop, it is 3 2-hour sessions over the course of a week. And of course, you'll work towards building your own financial foundation. So we are offering 2 cohorts for this. The first is October 23rd, 25th, and 27th. The time is from 3 to 5. And also November 14th, 15th, and 16th, the time is from noon to 2. When you enroll into these, please be sure that you are able to attend at least 2 of the 3 sessions. These workshops are open to students, but also faculty and staff. If this sounds like it will be helpful, our director, Julie, hosts the Financial Foundations workshops. So we do have some QR codes here with direct links to some of the programs I just mentioned for easy access. It looks like Aiden plugged some of these in the chat as well, which is fantastic. If you're interested in scheduling an appointment through Starfish, this link will take you directly to Starfish. Again, only current students can schedule appointments with us through Starfish. You can register yourself for a spot in our Financial Foundations workshop using that QR code or the link in the chat. If you are a current student and are passionate about financial literacy and can see yourself doing some of the things that we do here at the center, we are hiring right now for spring. We do have a work study and a wage payroll position available. So scan that link or click on the link to the job description in the chat. And finally, if you'd like to get involved in the mentoring program, the last QR code will take you to a link to sign up. So here's our contact information, and if you would like to give us some feedback on today's webinar, we would greatly appreciate it. What did you like? What did you find helpful? What would you like to learn more about in the next one, et cetera, et cetera. Aiden threw a link in the chat as well to our survey. So that does mark the end of today's webinar. Our next webinar is in 2 weeks, and our topic is building a better budget. So if you are on the budgeting rung of your own financial wellness ladder, this next one's for you. We would love to see you on October 3rd, same time, same place.